Life and Death of the Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy.
One evening of late summer, before the 19th century had reached 1/3 of its span, a young man and woman, the latter carrying a child, were approaching the large village of Weydon Priors, in Upper Wessex, on foot. They were plainly but not ill-clad, though the thick hoar of dust which had accumulated on their shoes and garments from an obviously long journey lent a disadvantageous shabbiness to their appearance just now. What was really peculiar, however, in this couple's progress, and would have attracted the attention of any casual observer otherwise disposed to overlook them, was the perfect silence they preserved. They walked side by side in such a way as to suggest afar off the low, easy, confidential chat of people full of reciprocity. Sometimes the man's bent elbow almost touched her shoulder, for she kept as close to his side as was possible without actual contact, but she seemed to have no idea of taking his arm, nor he of offering it, and far from exhibiting surprise at his ignoring silence, she appeared to receive it as a natural thing. If any word at all were uttered by the little group, it was an occasional whisper of the woman to the child, a tiny girl in short clothes and blue boots of knitted yarn, and the murmured babble of the child in reply. That the man and woman were husband and wife, and the parents of the girl in arms, there could be little doubt. For a long time there was none, beyond the voice of a weak bird singing a trite old evening song that might doubtless have been heard on the hill at the same hour. "Any trade doing here?" And thinking the laborer did not understand him, he added. The young man and woman ordered a basin each of the mixture, steaming hot, and sat down to consume it at leisure. The child began to prattle impatiently, and the wife more than once said to her husband, "Michael, how about our lodging? You know we may have trouble in getting it if we don't go soon." At the end of the first basin the man had risen to serenity. At the second he was jovial, at the third, argumentative. At the fourth, the qualities signified by the shape of his face, the occasional clench of his mouth, and the fiery spark of his dark eye, began to tell in his conduct. He was overbearing, even brilliantly quarrelsome. The conversation took a high turn, as it often does on such occasions. The ruin of good men by bad wives, and, more particularly the frustration of many a promising youth's high aims and hopes, and the extinction of his energies, by an early imprudent marriage, was the theme. "I did for myself that way thoroughly," said the trusser, with a contemplative bitterness that was well nigh resentful. "I married at 18. Like the fool that I was, and this is the consequence o't." He pointed at himself and family with a wave of the hand intended to bring out the penuriousness of the exhibition. The young woman, his wife, who seemed accustomed to such remarks, acted as if she did not hear them, and continued her intermittent private words on tender trifles to the sleeping and waking child, who was just big enough to be placed for a moment on the bench beside her when she wished to ease her arms. "For my part, one don't see why men who have got wives, and don't want them, shouldn't get rid of 'em as these gypsy fellows do their old horses," said the man in the tent. "Why shouldn't they put 'em up and sell 'em by auction to men who are in need of such articles? Hey? Why, begad, I'd sell mine this minute, if anybody would buy her." "There's them that would do that," some of the guests replied, looking at the woman, who was by no means ill-favored. From his appearance he had possibly been in former time groom or coachman to some neighboring county family. "I've had my breedings in as good circles, I may say, as any man," he added, "and I know true cultivation, or nobody do. And I can declare she's got it, in the bone, mind ye, I say, as much as any female in the fair, though it may want a little bringing out." Then, crossing his legs, he resumed his pipe with a nicely adjusted gaze at a point in the air. But he speedily lapsed into his former conviction, and said harshly, "Well, then, now is your chance. I am open to an offer for this gem o' creation. She turned to her husband and murmured, "Michael, you have talked this nonsense in public places before. A joke is a joke, but you may make it once too often, mind. I know I've said it before. I meant it. All I want is a buyer. Here, I am waiting to know about this offer of mine. The woman is no good to me. Who'll have her?" The company had by this time decidedly degenerated, and the renewed inquiry was received with a laugh of appreciation. The woman whispered. She was imploring and anxious. "Come, come, it is getting dark, and this nonsense won't do. If you don't come along I shall go without you. Come. Will any Jack Rag or Tom Straw among ye buy my goods?" The woman's manner changed, and her face assumed the grim shape and color of which mention has been made. Mike, said she, "this is getting serious." "Oh, too serious. Will anybody buy her?" said the man. "I wish somebody would," said she firmly. "Her present owner is not at all to her liking." "Nor you to mine," said he. "So we are agreed about that. Gentlemen, you hear? It's an agreement to part. She shall take the girl if she wants to, and go her ways. I'll take my tools and go my ways. 'Tis simple as scripture history. Now then, stand up, Susan, and show yourself." "Don't my cheel," whispered a buxom staylace dealer in voluminous petticoats, who sat near the woman. "Our good man don't know what he's saying." The woman, however, did stand up. "Now who's auctioneer?" cried the hay trusser. "I be," promptly answered a short man with a nose resembling a copper knob, a damp voice, and eyes like buttonholes. "Who'll make an offer for this lady?" The woman looked on the ground, as if she maintained her position by a supreme effort of will. "5 shillings, said someone, at which there was a laugh. "No insults," said the husband. "Who'll say a guinea?" Nobody answered, and the female dealer in stay laces interposed. "Behave yourself, moral, good man, for heaven's love. Ah, what a cruelty is the poor soul married to. Bed and board is dear at some figures, 'pon my vation 'tis." "Set it higher, auctioneer," said the trusser. "If they don't take her for that, in 10 seconds they'll have to give more," said the husband. "Very well. Now, auctioneer, add another. 3 guineas, going for 3 guineas, said the roomy man. "No bid," said the husband. "Good Lord, why she's cost me 50 times the money, if a penny." "Go on." 4 guineas, cried the auctioneer. "I'll tell ye what. I won't sell her for less than 5, said the husband, bringing down his fist so that the basins danced. "I'll sell her for 5 guineas to any man that will pay me the money and treat her well, and he shall have her forever, and never hear aught o' me. But she shan't go for less. Now then, 5 guineas, and she's yours. Susan, you agree?" She bowed her head with absolute indifference. 5 guineas, said the auctioneer, or she'll be withdrawn. "Do anybody give it? The last time. Yes or no?" "Yes," said a loud voice from the doorway. All eyes were turned. Standing in the triangular opening which formed the door of the tent was a sailor, who unobserved by the rest had arrived there within the last 2 or 3 minutes. A dead silence followed his affirmation. "You say you do?" asked the husband, staring at him. "I say so," replied the sailor. "Saying is one thing, and paying is another. Where's the money?" The spectators had indeed taken the proceedings throughout as a piece of mirthful irony carried to extremes, and had assumed that, being out of work, he was as a consequence out of temper with the world, and society, and his nearest kin. But with the demand and response of real cash the jovial frivolity of the scene departed. A lurid color seemed to fill the tent, and change the aspect of all therein. The mirth wrinkles left the listeners' faces, and they waited with parting lips. "Now," said the woman, breaking the silence, so that her low dry voice sounded quite loud. "Before you go further, Michael, Listen to me. If you touch that money, I and this girl go with the man. Mind, it is a joke no longer. A joke? Of course it is not a joke, shouted her husband, his resentment rising at her suggestion. I take the money. The sailor takes you. That's plain enough. It has been done elsewhere, and why not here? Faith, nor I, said her husband. But she is willing provided she can have the child. She said so only the other day when I talked out. That you swear? Said the sailor to her. I do, said she, after glancing at her husband's face and seeing no repentance there. Very well, she shall have the child, and the bargain's complete. She paused for an instant, with a close glance at him. Then dropping her eyes again, and saying nothing, she took up the child and followed him as he made towards the door. On reaching it she turned, and pulling off her wedding ring flung it across the booth in the hay trusser's face. Mike, she said, I've lived with thee a couple of years, and had nothing but temper. Now I'm no more to I'll try my luck elsewhere. 'Twill be better for me and Elizabeth Jane both. So good-bye. Seizing the sailor's arm with her right hand, and mounting the little girl on her left, she went out of the tent sobbing bitterly. A stolid look of concern filled the husband's face, as if, after all, he had not quite anticipated this ending, and some of the guests laughed. He rose, and walked to the entrance with the careful tread of one conscious of his alcoholic load. Some others followed, and they stood looking into the twilight. The difference between the peacefulness of inferior nature and the willful hostilities of mankind was very apparent at this place. In contrast with the harshness of the act just ended within the tent was the sight of several horses crossing their necks and rubbing each other lovingly as they waited in patience to be harnessed for the homeward journey. Outside the fair, in the valleys and woods, all was quiet. Where did the sailor live? Asked a spectator, when they had vainly gazed around. God knows that, replied the man who had seen high life. He's without doubt a stranger here. He came in about 5 minutes ago, said the furmity woman, joining the rest with her hands on her hips. And then, a stepped back, and then, a looked in again. I'm not a penny the better for him. Well, the woman will be better off, said another of a more deliberative turn. For seafaring natures be very good shelter for shorn lambs, and the man do seem to have plenty of money, which is what she's not been used to lately, by all showings. Mark me, I'll not go after her, said the trusser, returning doggedly to his seat. Let her go. If she's up to such vagaries she must suffer for 'em. She'd no business to take the maid, 'tis my maid, and if it were the doing again she shouldn't have her. Perhaps from some little sense of having countenanced an indefensible proceeding, perhaps because it was late, the customers thinned away from the tent shortly after this episode. She shook him, but could not wake him. As the tent was not to be struck that night, the fair continuing for 2 or 3 days, she decided to let the sleeper, who was obviously no tramp, stay where he was and his basket with him. Extinguishing the last candle, and lowering the flap of the tent she left it, and drove away.